we're down here in Santee, and we got Pat Williams here, and we're in Lone Star BBQ, and this place is unreal. I mean, the stuff you see in here goes way, way back, and I happened to look on the wall and see a picture of my first car, which is old 51 Henry J, and that just sparked me up. But Pat, just tell us a little bit about what you have here and the vision that you did have whenever you first started, because there's a lot of stuff that had to take a long time to get, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, you know, people ask me that I collect antiques, and I sort of chuckle about it. I said, no, I collect old stores. I've got these 4 stores, and I'm from Springfield, South Carolina originally, and I have a farm over there, and I do a lot of hunting and fishing, and my 2 fishing and hunting cabins are old stores. So that's my thing, I guess you could say. I really, I think I did have a love for the old buildings. My granddaddy had an old store. My uncle had an old store back when you could buy penny candy for a penny. Not today. But, and I just thought of moving these buildings when I found them vacant and to make a restaurant out of them. I've never been in restaurant business before, but I thought it'd be a fun thing to do, and it'd preserve the old buildings. So we moved these buildings to this site a mile out of Santee 14 years ago. And we've been open as a restaurant, Lone Star BBQ and Mercantile, for the last 13 years. And we've had a lot of fun with it. It's strictly family oriented, and we can salute the flag, we can say prayers, we can do what we want to in our building because it's independent, it's not a chain. And I really get a kick out of seeing families come in. We're near the state park, we're near a golf course, and I say we have live entertainment, bluegrass or country, which was the type music when these buildings were king of the hill, so to speak. And I say the locals love it, and the tourists find it cultural shock, but they love it too. With the old buildings, we've got 4 here. The 2 on either end came from the Lone Star community, which is at the head of Lake Marion, about 10 miles away. They were built in 1892 when the railroad came through the community. The oldest building is the old Schuler store, which is the main dining room. It was built on what is now US 301, and we have pictures of a dirt road, the old store in the background, mules and wagons in the foreground. It was built in 1876 on the Schuler plantation. And then the 3rd or 4th building, I should say, I call the modern building. It was built in 1922-23 on what is now US 15, about 4 miles east of Santee. The tables and the connectors that connect the buildings were built from a 2-room plantation schoolhouse that was located on Milligan Place Plantation, about 2 miles east of Santee. There were roof trusses 22 feet long, heart pine material. You can see, you don't find wood like that anymore, but that was old roof trusses from the old school. The school was about to fall down, so we utilized that, and it fit right in with what we wanted to do. We wanted to keep everything as natural as we could, and thankfully the building inspectors in Orangeburg County allowed us to leave everything that we possibly could in its original state. We didn't repaint the old hanging lights from the ceilings, things like that, just as they were before. We had to rewire, replumb, and the only real change that I think that I didn't want to do but I had to do, the buildings typically were 10 to 15 feet above ground level. We had to raise them to 32 inches above ground level. Other than that, it's as authentic as it can be. And of course, the buildings, as you can see, are full of antiques. I would say literally 80% of the antiques were in the old buildings when we acquired them. Old showcases, drink boxes, merchandise for sale. When the merchants closed, they just locked the doors and that was it. And one of the buildings had maybe 20 boxes of old magazines. I had no reason to store them all. I'd had no room. But I went through every magazine and tore out the old pictures that were reminiscent of the times these stores were kings of the hill. And that's where the Henry J. magazine picture came from. But all the stuff in the background, the old well pulley, pitcher pumps, fertilizer distributors, mule collars, telephone insulation. All of this was in the old buildings when we acquired them. The old barrels, people didn't ship by cardboard. Most of it was wooden boxes or barrels. And they were stored in a smokehouse attached to one of the buildings. Of course, there was no ice or no electricity when these buildings were built, so you had to have smokehouse to cure to keep the meat. They'd salt it, they'd hang it, they'd smoke it, and that was the way it was. And we also have an old outhouse or privy. They had no indoor plumbing, so it went with the building. We moved that with one of the buildings. And finally, you know, nowadays people don't make much moonshine whiskey or stump old whiskey. I reckon if they're going to break the law, it's more drugs of one type or another. Well, back in the days of these old stores, those things didn't exist. But people did make amount of shine, a bootleg. And so a sheriff broke up 2 stills in his tour of duty. He gave one to us and gave the other one to Dollywood. So that puts us, in back. So that puts us in pretty tall cotton. But back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, people made moonshine in South Carolina. That was a way of life for a lot of rural people. The old post office here, it was in this building. It's a cute story about the post office. 32 wooden boxes, small, very rural. The Postal Authority kept writing Mrs. Ziegler, the store owner, and postmistress, that, hey, you're too rural, you're too small, we're going to close you down. They didn't realize Mrs. Ziegler was friends and kissing cousins with the late Senator Strom Thurmond. So every time the Postal Authority would write her and say, we're going to close you, she would write Cousin Strom. And guess what? They didn't close the post office. So Mrs. Ziegler got ready to retire. And I might mention, this is the last store that was open for business. It closed in 1997. So it was right up until recently working as a general store. And I like to say that the old rural stores like these and rural churches were the hubs of civilization in their day. That's where you saw your friends, you socialized, you heard the good news and bad news, you sat around the pot-bellied stove, you told the tales. The old-timers might have sat on the bench in front, played the fiddle, played the mouth organ, strummed the banjo. That was entertainment in yesteryear. And you didn't have 5 cars in a garage. You didn't have interstates. You didn't have airports or railroads. You walked. You rode a mule or a horse, or you had a mule and wagon or a horse and buggy, and that was your mode of transportation. You didn't go to the cities to shop. You shopped in these old rural stores where you interacted with your friends, and the same thing with the rural churches. You saw your friends on Sunday. And these were the hubs of civilization in their day. Now, an interesting story, in 1988-89, a movie was filmed in great part in the building we are in right now, Ziegler's store. It was called Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken. It was about a little girl that was a horse dive at a circus, and she ultimately dived and went blind, hit the water the wrong way on the back of a horse, and then a year later, without anybody knowing, she'd practiced and did the dive again perfectly. The building, we have sets of that movie. We have a big poster of that movie. On the exterior of this, there's a big color sign of the store owner as an engineer driving a train, and the face of that engineer is the caricature of the store owner, Mr. Ziegler. And that's on the exterior of this building. But a lot of history, and I'd like to say only if these walls could talk, they would tell tales and tell stories of a bygone era that it's different day at different times, several generations removed. When I did the project years ago, I said when people walk through the front door, I want them to feel like they're going back in time. And I do think they feel like they're going back in time. And finally, I might mention that it is family owned and operated. My son is the chef and general manager. He's been the chef for 12 years. His wife, my daughter-in-law, is the front-end manager. And I have grandchildren that work as waitresses or serve the iced tea, Daisy and Charlotte in particular. But again, how many days or times in modern day do you know a business that the family can run it, not only the business, but enjoy the love and interaction of one another? And we try to not only do it with the family, but the friends that come in. And we have a guest register. We've had, I think, practically all 50 states represented in signing the guest register. And the comments are, what a wonderful experience, so much history. Thanks for saving the stores, like Mama's cooking in olden days, on and on. I would say in 13 years, I could name a half dozen comments that weren't extremely positive. So I think we do have something here that's almost like a private museum accompanied by a lot of good food.